Now, 99% of golfers release the golf club completely wrong, which from doing so, they have a terrible control of dispersion of the golf ball, left and right shots, and losing a ton of distance on the table. That's where 1% of the golfers, where we see all the best players in the world, release the club absolutely perfectly. But there is a ton of misconceptions when it comes to this topic. And once we really get to the depths of it and get this release pattern into our golf swing, we're going to be hitting the ball way straighter and way further. Now, the first way that golfers release the club wrong is by far the most common, and that is actively trying to overly release the hands going through the golf ball. So this is where a hand style release, or we could call it flash speed release, used to be taught quite often in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s. It was a method that was used to create speed going through the golf ball, as absolutely having a little bit of flash speed through the golf ball can make you gain a little bit of club head speed, but it won't be as efficient of creating speed than releasing the club the proper way. So that's where you would have a big drop off in accuracy from doing so. Because if you are quickly rolling those hands going through the impact, the time that club face is actually square is very, very, very small. It's an absolute flash of split second, again, flash speed of the hand. So that's where we're not going to be able to time up our club face very well. It will be very reliant on timing, which is why you see the guys who really made that release pattern really successful. Let's say someone like Ernie Els. Ernie Els has a big roll of the hands of players really from that generation. And what is Ernie Els known for? Really silky smooth rhythm. That's one of the big reasons why he is so reliant on rhythm, and he's absolutely one of the greats of the game. So he made it work from thousands and thousands of golf balls on the range hitting, of course, getting it into his game. But rhythm helped him to be able to time up that release more often. That's where, for amateur golfers who don't have the time at their disposal, that those guys who swung the club that way back in the day, you're not really going to be able to get it into the golf swing because it requires too many hours of practice to get there. Because if we are having that club face nice and square, so square to the swing arc, and if we then try to release the club with the hands at the same time, we are getting the club face from being square and then closed. So it's like, if I did this in my golf swing and try to really fire and flip the hands, really wrap the club over, I would actually hit the ball way, way left, because my club face is square and then I'm closing it over. Which is another thing why the golfers from back in the day made that work, is because what was square back then is not square now. We didn't really talk about keeping the club face square to the swing arc back in 80s, 90s and early 2000s. What was a square club face was toe to the sky. Now, when the toe is pointed to the sky here at shaft parallel, you would have to roll the hands. Body rotation would have to stall, you would have to flip, which is one of the big reasons as well, even if, let's say, for most players who can't create that flash speed that some might be able to from this pattern, a lot of players would actually make you a little bit shorter. So that's because their body would actually have to stop rotating to be able to time that up. And that'll be a video in the future of the two release patterns and how they compare each other in distance. So wrapping up that release pattern, the hand style, it's a little bit too reliant on timing. You need an open club face in your golf swing to make it work, and you need a ton of hours on the driving range. And I mean a lot of golf balls, not just going to the driving range 3 days a week. This is literally making it almost your full-time job, trying to make that release pattern work. Too much for players to be able to really implement into their game. So the second mistake I see with players when it comes to their release pattern is they'll be trying to do this, what the 1% of players do, and that is having that nice modern passive release, but they're not doing it correctly, because what these players are doing is actually a little bit contradictory to what we think, which we're going to get into at the end of this video, of course, how to do this properly, release it properly. Because when we just watch a player, modern player, with that club face, not turning over at all, hand path going in to the left, we'll really get that assumption that that club is being held off. That's where it looks like they're holding onto their angles for dear life. And you'll hear a lot of commentators on, when you're watching golf, say, when they analyze a swing going through the golf ball, they say, he's really held that off. Look how much that club face has stayed stable and square. They're actually not trying to do that at all. Again, we're going to get into that. Because if you do try to hold those angles square, one thing that's going to happen, if you hold on to everything, you're going to lose a ton of speed. Because if we hold on for dear life to that club to try and not get the face to turn over, you're going to tense up, not only your arms, you're going to tense up your body as well. The more tense you get, the less speed you're going to be able to apply through the golf shot. So that's one thing that's huge. We don't want to lose speed. But also, your club face is not going to then be tracing the arc nicely. It's going to stay open to the arc going through the golf ball. You're not going to have the natural squaring that we want to happen. So you'll most likely hit the ball out towards the right quite often and quite short. So that's where we don't want to be holding off the angles. It's a huge myth, a huge misconception. So we don't want to have that in there. So I'm wrapping up that kind of hold off release. Again, quietens down your distance, big time from being too tense, and you can hit the ball out towards the right quite often. Don't want either of those. So to get this 1% release properly, what do we need to do? We need to rotate nice and smoothly going through the golf ball. We need our club face to be square. So we can't have a nice passive release if our club face is open. We'd have to roll, release and flip through it. So rotation going through the golf ball is super, super important. So what we want to do when we rotate, we really want to have that rotation constant going through that golf ball. Because why we want that rotation constant is because your hand path is going to follow where you rotate. If I'm rotating to the left going through the golf ball, my hands and arms are going to follow around. So that's how we see those pros exit their hand path to the left going through the ball. If we stall out our rotation, the hand path is going to fly out to the right and we're going to get more of this nasty looking hand release, even if we're not trying to do it. So that's going to be a lot of you out there. You're not trying to do the flash release, but we are seeing it in there because your body stops rotating. So always when it comes to rotation, you've got to know what is causing you to not rotate, because even the least flexible of us can turn through the golf ball. I'm a golfer with cerebral palsy in my left side. I shouldn't be able to rotate, but I can because my golf swing is in the right place. So let me hit 2 shots just so you can see here. I'm going to do one where I stall and look at my finish in both of these swings. This is big key for this, which we're going to talk about in the drill and the feel. So this is one where I stall out a little bit. Look at where my chest and my hips are pointing, either at the target or to the right of it. That's not good, because what we want to do with our finish, watch this one. See it where I'm pointing now? Everything's pointing to the left of that shrubby tree there. Let's have a look at those 2 release patterns. One was releasey with the hands, wasn't trying to release it was just the rotation stalling. And the other one, hand path was exiting way more to the left, nice and passive, the 1% release. It's the rate of your rotation, that rotational speed staying constant going through the golf ball. Again, know why you're stopping your rotation. Quite often it is players are doing things in their golf swing to stop it, like maybe steep shaft, early extension, open club face. Absolutely. We could dive into that in this video, but it'd be way, way too long. I've got plenty of videos on my channel and a whole video course called The Ultimate Guide to Rotation and Downswing that dives into all this. There's a link to that in the description. So, other than that, club face being open. When that club face is open, again, that's where we're going to have to release it, like the old classic toe up. We have to release the hands to be able to make that work. We want club face to be nice and square to spine angle, and that's absolutely awesome. So again, knowing your own golf swing is so important for this. Knowing why you're opening it. Are you opening it via grip? Are you opening it via forearm rotation? Are you opening it via a cup in the left wrist? Or even coming out of posture? So many ways. That's why lessons, again, there's links to my online lessons in the description also. And there's plenty of videos on my channel about keeping that club face square. But if your face is square and you're rotating nicely through the golf ball, you're going to have that passive release without you even trying. I'm not trying to do any of this with my hands and arms. My hands and arms are actually staying very light and loose. The turn is getting them to rotate and come through to the left. That's keeping the face passive from good rotation. None of it's via trying to hold off. That's a huge, huge myth. So before we dive into the feel and the drill for this, as they're both kind of tied to each other, let's look at these 2 shots here of Tommy Fleetwood, one from the front on and one from down the line. So these 2 swings are not the exact same swing. I don't think they are anyway, but they would be very close to each other. Look like they're from the same tournament. So what we can see here from Tommy is something that a lot of golfers misidentify when they're looking at tour pro swings. If we look at the front on, we can see, yes, everything that we talked about, hand path exiting left, nice rotation, passive club face, that's the 1% release that we want to do. But when we look at the front on angle, this is hugely misinterpreted by a lot of golfers, is you'll see as he gets just to shaft parallel in his follow through, you're going to see how the right forearm wraps over the left. So a lot of golfers will look at that and think that's him actively releasing the golf club. Now, what we've got to remember, golf swing's a rotational sport. Everything in the golf swing rotates at some point. So that's where, if your hands and arms are nice, light and loose and following what your body is doing, they're naturally going to release as we get to the unloading phase when that shaft reaches parallel to the ground again. You'll naturally unwind going through there. But will we actually see that going through on the down the line? No, unless a player does have more of an outward movement with the hands, then you will see it. But then we've got to think, okay, if it's someone who's actually doing an active release, you will see them have much more movement of their hands and arms going through the golf ball. So really through that impact region, you'll see that big wrap over, not later like we see with Tommy, for example. So be careful when you're looking at that. When you're looking at players and their release patterns, look at it from the down the line. That is the angle to see all the good stuff from there. Okay, the feel and the drill here. So this is really nice and simple. The feel comes from the drill. And what are we doing? We're actually doing Tommy Fleetwood's dead arm drill. So Tommy Fleetwood's dead arm drill is essentially his golf swing. There's a recent video he put out talking about his swing and about the drill that got his swing to look like how it is, and it's from a drill he called the dead arm drill, where he would be in a half swing and he would swing through into that finish there with a very Tommy Fleetwood sawn off finish, getting nice rotation of the body, letting everything point nice and left at impact, and then that got him rotating without much arm involvement. So Tommy used to be really quite handsy going for the golf ball, and he wanted more turn. So if we're just doing something like that, nice and simple, nice and a half swing, of course, make sure our club face is square, and then just getting to a half swing, finishing, just in a Tommy Fleetwood style finish, everything pointing to the left there. You're going to notice when you look on camera doing that, you're going to have much better of a release pattern without trying to. So you're going to have a much more passive face, and you'll hear time and time again when a lot of golfers try to do Tommy Fleetwood style finish, they'll notice that they'll hit the ball way more consistent. Their dispersion, so the left and right shots will come in considerably. It will really gap in. Why is that? Because the face is becoming more square and more stable from that better, freer flowing rotation. So just doing it as a half swing is a great way, and getting everything pointing left, belt buckle and chest. Really try and point it as left as you can. That's going to keep the rotation flowing through. That's going to get it into your swing via a drill. And the feeling for the golf course, just absolutely have a fuller backswing and feel again. Everything with that body is pointing left. You could do the Tommy finish if you want to, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. So that's where you could just go for a full finish all the way through, but make sure everything is pointing way left. We see that even with like Colin Morikawa here. Look where his body is pointing post-impact. Way, way left. Even someone like Shane Lowry really gets everything pointing way left into his finish. So that's where finish as far left as you can with that body. And that's going to get you in a much better position, a much better movement of your release pattern going through the golf ball. This is something I think about quite a lot on the golf course because it's really, really simple. And I just love it how it makes that club face nice and passive, brings that shot dispersion in nicely. So it's how 1% golfers do the release pattern correctly, but how 99% get it wrong, but you're not far away from getting it right. So this little tweak is going to make a big difference. If you enjoyed the video, click that like button if you want more golf instruction. Just like this, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell button too to be notified every time I put out a video.